The morning air hung heavy and oppressive over the hallowed grounds of Fort Montgomery. A sky the color of old sorrow seemed to weep in silent solidarity. General Evelyn Thorne had seen this too many times. She had stood with a spine of steel, a flag folded neatly in her hands, as a final salute was given for other people's children. But this was different. The casket, draped in the stars and stripes, held her son, Sergeant Liam Thorne, 29 years old, stolen by a roadside bomb during a patrol outside Kandahar. She wore her full dress uniform, just as he had asked. "Mom," he had said, "when it's my time, I want to see you standing there in your stars." So there she was, the deep blue jacket, the medals on her chest telling a story of a life devoted to service. From the outside, she was a fortress. Inside, her soul was a shattered landscape. The black SUV pulled up to Section 77, the final resting place for fallen of recent conflicts. Evelyn sat wedged between her sister, Clara, and Liam's godfather, Colonel Cole. He was a master sergeant she'd served with in Mosul. Her hands, trembling imperceptibly, clutched the funeral program. On the cover, her son grinned in his fatigues, a vibrant young man frozen in time. It all felt like a waking nightmare. "I don't know if I can do this," Evelyn whispered, the word hollow, drained of all emotion. "You've done harder," Cole murmured, his voice rough with shared grief. The car door opened. As Evelyn's polished heels clicked on the pavement, a few young soldiers nearby recognized her and saluted. She was a general, the first woman to climb so high in her field. But today, none of that mattered. Today, she was just a mother walking toward a hole in the ground that would swallow her world. That's when she saw him, a local patrolman, pacing near the perimeter. His vehicle was parked askew, lights off but engine running. He wore mirrored sunglasses despite the thick cloud cover. A cold knot formed in Evelyn's stomach. He wasn't part of the honor guard. He was just traffic control, and you could tell he had no idea what was happening here. He turned, his gaze locked onto her, his eyes hidden behind a reflective glass. "Hey!" he barked, his voice sharp. "Ma'am, I need to see some ID." Evelyn just blinked. Surely, he wasn't talking to her. "I'm talking to you," he said, louder this time, taking a step toward her. His hand rested on the grip of his pistol. "I am General Evelyn Thorne," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here for my son's funeral." "I said stop right there," he shouted. And then the unthinkable happened. He pulled his weapon. A gasp rippled through the mourners. Evelyn froze, her hands slowly rising into the air. "I am not armed," she said, her voice a low, calm command. "This is my dress uniform. You are making a terrible mistake." But the officer, Reynolds, didn't listen. His gun was leveled at her chest. His next words made the world stop. Drop to the ground now. 30 years of training kicked in. Every instinct screamed at her. She had faced down threats in foreign lands, stared into the eyes of the enemy, but never, not once, did she imagine it would come to this. A gun in her face in the sacred place, on this unbearable day. "I am an unarmed United States Army general," she stated, her voice ringing with authority. "And you are pointing your weapon at a mother trying to bury her son. I don't care what kind of costume you're wearing," Reynolds snapped back. "Get on the ground before I put you there." That's when Colonel Cole moved. "Sir," he said, stepping forward, his hands open, "that is General Thorne. You need to put that weapon down right now." "Back off," Reynolds yelled, swinging the gun from Evelyn to Cole. Claire began to sob by the car. A young soldier from the honor guard tensed, ready to move, but his commanding officer shot him a look that froze him in place. No one wanted this to get worse. Evelyn remained perfectly still, her hands in the air, her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat of disbelief and fear. But her voice, when she spoke, was ice. "Officer," she said slowly, "I'm going to reach into my coat pocket, and I'm going to show you my military ID." "You reach, I shoot," he said, his voice cold and certain. All around them, the soft shuffle of feet could be heard as mourners pulled their children away, their whispers cutting through the silence. Two women who had served with Evelyn already had their phones out, recording everything. That's when one of the honor guard soldiers finally broke protocol. His voice was urgent but low on his radio. "Requesting immediate supervisor at Section 77. We have an armed officer threatening a general. Repeat, this is urgent." But help was still a lifetime away. Officer Reynolds never wavered. "Turn around," he growled. "On your knees. Hands on your head." Evelyn closed her eyes for a single, painful second. She had survived live fire. She had walked through the ruins of bombed-out cities. She had lost friends, soldiers, and now her only son. But this moment, this humiliation, was a different kind of wound. Still, she began to lower herself to the asphalt. She did it not out of fear, but to protect everyone else. The last thing she wanted was for her son's funeral to become a bloodbath. From the crowd, an old veteran in a wheelchair yelled out, "What in God's name is wrong with you?" "That's General Thorne." Reynolds didn't flinch. He was in his own world now, tunnel vision fixed on her. Someone shouted, "Somebody stop that maniac!" But Evelyn raised her hand slightly, a small, silent command. No. That's when another officer came sprinting down the road. Lieutenant Maria Vega had been directing traffic at the main gate and saw the crisis from 50 yards out. "Reynolds, holster your weapon now," she screamed as she ran. He didn't move. The gun stayed fixed on Evelyn. "I said holster it. That is a 3-star general." Vega was right in his face now. When he still refused, she didn't hesitate. She slammed her hands against his arm, knocking the pistol from his grip. It clattered loudly on the pavement. Stunned, Reynolds staggered back and instinctively reached for the fallen weapon. Vega was faster. She twisted his arm behind his back in a control hold. "You're done," she hissed through clenched teeth. "You are done." Other officers rushed in, finally dragging a struggling Reynolds away. Evelyn was still on her knees, hands on her head. A soldier, Sergeant Torres, who had been under Evelyn's command in Mosul, hurried to her side. "Ma'am, it's over," she said gently, helping her to her feet. "We've got you." Evelyn stood, her legs feeling as heavy as stone. She looked out the sea of shocked faces, the silent tears, and the casket, her son's casket, still waiting. The sacred moment had been stolen, shattered, and if she thought the nightmare was over, she was wrong. This was just the beginning. Within minutes, the videos were everywhere. The image of Officer Reynolds pointing a gun at a kneeling General Evelyn Thorne was exploding online. By 10:06 a.m., the cemetery was swarming with police, military brass, and news reporters. But the crowd, the mourners who had come to honor a fallen soldier, had seen it with their own eyes. They couldn't shake the image of a mother in uniform brought to her knees on the worst day of her life. Evelyn was guided to a small tent for privacy. Her hands trembled so much she couldn't remove her hat. Her body was still locked in survival mode. Cole stood beside her, his face a mask of silent rage. He had seen the horrors of war, but he looked like he couldn't breathe. Outside the tent, Sergeant Torres was arguing with 2 local cops. "Your man just threatened to execute a grieving mother. You think he was just on traffic duty is an excuse that's going to work on the 6 o'clock news?" Meanwhile, Reynolds sat cuffed in the back of a squad car, his face blank. He never asked if Evelyn was okay. He never asked about her son. The only thing he muttered over and over was, "She didn't belong here. She wasn't acting right." Back in the tent, Evelyn finally spoke, her voice a raw whisper. "He saw my skin before he saw my stars." Cole just bowed his head. "I've survived war zones," she continued, her voice breaking. "I have been a target for our nation's enemies. And the only time a gun has ever been pointed in my face on American soil was by one of our own at my son's funeral." Clara took her sister's hand. "He didn't break you, Evelyn." Evelyn slowly shook her head. "He didn't have to. He broke this day. This was supposed to be for Liam. Now this day would always be about him." A young soldier outside the tent, who had served with Liam, was already live-streaming. His voice shook with rage. "This is what we deal with. You can be a general, a mother in uniform at your own son's funeral, and they still see a threat. I watched him pull a gun on a woman I would follow into hell." Within an hour, millions had seen it. The story was everywhere. The funeral finally resumed, nearly 2 hours late. There were no speeches, no final bugle call, just a quiet, broken ceremony. Evelyn placed her hand on the polished wood of the casket, whispering a final goodbye only Liam would hear, before she stood and walked away. The Army trains you to keep moving, even when your heart is full of glass. But the world wasn't moving on. By 3 p.m., hashtag Justice for General Thorne was trending everywhere. The shaky cell phone video was undeniable. You could see Evelyn's hands in the air. You could hear the officer scream, "Get on the ground." There was no way to spin it. The police department tried. They posted a sterile corporate statement online. "We are aware of an incident. The officer has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." That was it. No apology, no mention of a 3-star general, a grieving mother, or a gun. The backlash was immediate and fierce. A sitting senator tweeted, "You call that an incident? It's a national disgrace." That evening, a retired general who'd been Evelyn's mentor went on live television, her voice cracking. "I have to explain to America that one of our finest was treated like a criminal while trying to bury her child. This wasn't a mistake. It's a reflection of something deeply wrong." By nightfall, silent protesters gathered outside the police station. Many were veterans in uniform, holding simple signs. "She served." He drew a gun. Evelyn remained silent, hidden away from the world at her sister Clara's home. But the world came to her. Banners of support appeared on the fence. Letters poured in from Gold Star families across the country. "I'm sorry the uniform didn't protect you," one mother wrote. Cole stayed close, making sure she ate, making sure she was safe, a silent guardian in her grief. On the 4th day, Evelyn finally spoke, not to the press, but to a private room of military families. No cameras were allowed, but someone recorded it anyway. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "I didn't cry when they told me Liam was gone. I didn't cry when they handed me his flag-draped casket. But I cried when that officer pointed his gun at me." She paused, and the room held its breath. "Not because I was afraid. I cried because I realized the uniform I gave my life to, the stars on my shoulder, couldn't stop him from seeing me as a threat first." That raw, human confession hit harder than any legal statement ever could. It lit a fire that couldn't be contained. The Department of Justice opened a federal investigation. The governor called it a grotesque betrayal. Officer Reynolds' union said they wouldn't comment. He remained silent. 6 months later, the nation had a front-row seat to a packed federal courtroom. It was filled with military personnel in dress uniforms, veterans who took up entire rows, and press who had been waiting since 5 in the morning. The Thorne family sat near the front. Evelyn was in simple civilian clothes. No ribbons, no stars, just Evelyn. Reynolds entered in a gray suit, no badge, no tie, and it seemed, without an ounce of regret. His lawyer played the standard card. My client was acting the line of duty, responding to a perceived threat. But those words meant little, because the jury wasn't just listening. They were watching. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. On the screen, that gray morning came to life. Reynolds' voice sharp and loud. Hands where I can see them. The room tensed. Evelyn Thorne in her full military uniform, standing calmly with her hands raised. And he never lowered the gun. When the lights came back on, no one said a word. Then came the testimony. First, Lieutenant Maria Vega, the officer who stopped Reynolds. She didn't hold back. He refused to listen. He was aggressive and locked in. I had to physically knock the weapon from his hands. The defense attorney tried to push back. "So you used force on a fellow officer?" Vega shot back. "I stopped him from shooting an unarmed, grieving mother. Call it what you want." Next was Cole. He spoke quietly, but his voice filled the room. "I've seen enemy fire, but I've never felt more helpless than in that moment. She acted like the soldier she is, and he looked at her like she was nothing." Then the prosecution dropped a bombshell. Reynolds' internal affairs record. 9 previous complaints for excessive force. One was a near-perfect match. A black Army Reserve captain, stopped in uniform, held at gunpoint. The case had been dismissed as a misunderstanding. It was clear this was a mistake. It was a pattern. The prosecution showed a photo of Liam Thorne on the screen. General Thorne came to bury her only son, the prosecutor said. Instead of respect, she faced a weapon aimed at her heart, not for what she did, but for what he saw when he looked at her. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She stood before the jury. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said. "I came here for accountability. I don't want another soldier's mother to kneel in fear." She looked directly at Reynolds. "I am not a symbol. I am a mother. And because of you, my son never had the funeral he deserved." Reynolds looked down for the first time. The jury took 4 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't hesitate. "Officer Reynolds, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." There was only silence in the room, heavy and sharp. After the verdict, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Microphones buzzed like flies. "General Thorne, do you feel justice was served?" Evelyn was quiet, looking up at the gray clouds. Just like that day, Clara and Cole stood beside her. Finally, she stepped forward to the microphones. "I didn't come here for revenge," Evelyn began, her voice cutting through the noise. "I came for accountability." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the reporters. "My question is this. If a 3-star general in full uniform can be seen as a threat while trying to bury her son, what does that mean for every other citizen who doesn't have rank and medals to protect them? This isn't just my story. It's a mirror held up to country. It is time for us to truly look at the reflection." Those words, raw and undeniable, echoed far wider and lasted far longer in the trial. But Evelyn didn't care about the spotlight. She went home on a quiet Monday morning, before the gates of Fort Montgomery were even open to the public. She returned. She brought a single folding chair and one sunflower, Liam's favorite. She sat by his grave for a long time, listening to the wind rustling through the grass.